In this part 2 video, I continue to pass along what I learned from Dale Bowie and Leopoldo Aguirre, also known as Polo. In the first video, we show how we can identify applications by the phi tuple, the stuff that is on the headers of the flow. Now we're going to do the same, but looking at the actual payload of it. Okay, and how from the payload we can identify some apps. The example we are going to use is with VLANs. So we can see that VLANs, VXLAN, sorry, it's an extension to traditional VLANs, and the VLANs have a limitation of 4,096 possible VLANs, and on cloud environment, and these cloud providers gets bigger, they need more than that, and then that's what VXLAN was actually created. So we see that the port for VXLANs is 4789, and we can see here that the way that VLANs are recognized is that they begin with the 0800 in the packet. Now, and as we did in the part 1 of the video, which by the way, I'm going to put a link to it in the description of this one, we're going to replay for an external machine some pickup that are actually recorded from a VLAN. And we'll see that when they get to QRadar, so let me pause the network activity tab, and notice that I have a filter on precisely that port, 4789. And if we look at any of this element of the traffic, notice that as application is identified as other. So in other words, QRadar doesn't identify this as VXLAN. And our objective of this exercise is to look inside the QFlow payload, extract that particular port and traffic information that identify that 0800 thing that identifies it as a VXLAN, and put here VXLANs. So as we did in the first video, we can use it for rules, for searches, for other things, right? If we look here at the payload, we see that 0800, okay? And then the rest of the package is the identification of the particular VXLAN. Okay, let's actually show you how easy that is. So in the documentation from Dale, what we need to do is in the same apps.conf file that we used for the WestSphere example on part 1, we need to actually add these specific lines. So let's actually do that. So we edit the file. Notice that we have the definition that we added for WestSphere, and we're going to paste that component and we save it. And the other part of the instruction is that now in this signature.xml file on the same path that these other apps are, we need to edit that one and add this block in here, which basically is telling QRadar that how to identify that traffic. And notice that there's a connection between this one and the app.conf. In the app.conf we put 15,001, and here we put also 50,001 as well. And notice that in here we are also saying that the destination port is that 478089, and that the packet begins, the source payload contains 0800. I'm not sure if we need to put the last two or just the first two, but nevertheless. So that's what we are going to copy here, and we're going to edit that file. So we're going to go here. We didn't touch, this is only for the payload, so we didn't touch this this file in the example number 1. So we are pasting this in here. Okay, we're going to save it. And just as in the example number 1, this requires deploy changes. Again, all the flow collector needs to have this information, so QRadar needs to make sure that this is deployed into all the components of the architecture. We see here, if we look at the details, those two files were changed, therefore deploy changes needs to be performed. I'm going to pause the video until that finishes. Now that the changes have been deployed, we go back to the network activity. So we return to the results, so we have the same filter. Let's clear this out by going real time, and let us replay the actual pickup again. As you see, with those two simple changes, we now have here on the application field VXLAN. So all those 4 flows now come. And again, this is looking at QFlow, the first 64 bytes of the payload. We can even pause it here. Not much else to show, but we see that in here the application field is actually well populated. 2 more points before we finish the video. In this URL, and the links and the pickups and all that are in a box folder referenced in the video description. Again, we explain how you get to that in the part 1 of this video series. And here's the explanation for the syntax of that signature.xml file. So we went from part 1 identifying applications and the flows from the frames of it on the 5 tuples. In this part 2, we did going further into QFlow into the first 64 bytes of the payload and identify extended VLANs or VXLANs. In part 3 of this video, we are going to attempt to go and use QNI to go further down into the content of the payload and do some interesting DNS application with Quad9. So stay tuned.